The moment I realized I might not make it out of those woods alive wasn't when I heard footsteps running toward me. It wasn't when I found my missing knife laid neatly across the trail like an invitation. It was earlier than that. It was when the forest went completely silent, and a single piece of music started playing somewhere deep between the trees, like someone had pressed play just for me. This happened back in 2016, but I can still replay every second of that night like a movie in my head. I've always loved hiking and solo camping. A few times a year, 4, maybe 5, I'd disappear into the forest just south of my town. Nothing extreme, no mountains, no cliffs, just endless flat land packed with thick trees and quiet trails. There was one spot I liked in particular. I don't even know if it was an official trail or just something locals slowly carved out over time. I never saw other hikers. No tents, no signs. It always felt like my own private stretch of wilderness. That weekend, I felt that familiar urge to get away. No phone distractions, no people, just a night alone with a campfire and my thoughts. I packed light, parked near the tree line, and hiked for almost 2 hours before reaching my usual clearing. The forest was calm and alive when I arrived. Birds calling, leaves shifting, distant insects humming. I took my time setting up camp, stacking firewood, getting comfortable. The sun was still high enough to paint everything gold through the branches. It felt peaceful, safe. As the sun dipped lower, the woods slowly transformed. The birds faded. The air cooled. Shadows stretched long and thin between the trees. Within minutes of darkness settling in, the forest became eerily quiet. That deep, unnatural quiet where you suddenly realize how exposed you really are. I was sitting by the fire, staring into the flames, when the silence broke. At first, I thought it was wind. Then I realized it was music. Faint, distant, floating through the trees like a ghost. It sounded like an old classical recording, something you'd expect to hear on a dusty vinyl record. Soft violins, slow rhythm, repeating melody. I stood up and listened. It was far away, but clear enough to hear. My first thought was another camper, maybe someone playing music way too loud at their site. It wasn't unheard of, even though I'd never seen anyone else out here before. Still, something about it felt wrong. The song didn't change, it didn't fade, it just kept looping. The same exact piece over and over, echoing unnaturally through the empty forest. I waited at my campsite for nearly half an hour, hoping it would stop or at least shift tracks. It never did. That uneasy pressure in my chest kept building. Curiosity mixed with discomfort until I finally decided I needed to see what was causing it, if only to calm my nerves enough to sleep. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the sound. The further I walked, the louder the music became, yet the woods around me stayed pitch black. No campfires, no lanterns, no voices, just trees swallowing the light of my flashlight. That's when I realized something else. I had brought nothing for protection. No knife, no pepper spray, just a flashlight and blind confidence. Goosebumps crept up my arms as my heartbeat picked up. Every snapped twig behind me made my shoulders tense. Still, I kept moving. Eventually, the music sounded like it was only a few dozen feet away, and then my flashlight caught it. A large speaker, propped up against a tree. Alone, no tent, no backpack, no footprints. Just a dusty old speaker from the early 2000s, humming classical music into the empty forest. My stomach tightened. I swept the light around the area. Nothing. Just trees and shadows. After a few seconds of hesitation, I stepped closer and pressed the power button. The music stopped instantly. The silence that followed felt wrong, thick and suffocating, like the forest itself was holding its breath. I didn't stay there another second. I practically jogged back to my campsite, relief washing over me when I saw my fire still burning. The familiar glow felt like safety, but the feeling didn't leave. Something was off. The longer I sat there, the more uneasy I became, like I wasn't alone anymore. That's when I reached for my knife. It wasn't there. Neither was my pepper spray, my matches, my cooking utensils. Gone. Every muscle in my body tightened. Someone had been in my campsite. I didn't hesitate. I started shoving whatever I had left into my backpack, ready to leave immediately. That's when the music started again. Closer this time. Much closer. The same looping classical melody drifting through the darkness behind me. Panic surged through my chest. I grabbed my bag and bolted toward the trail, running blindly through the trees until the sound began fading behind me. After about 15 minutes, I slowed to a fast walk, breathing hard, trying to convince myself I was getting away. Then my flashlight caught something lying across the trail ahead. My missing gear. Laid out neatly in a perfect line. Knife, spray, utensils, matches, placed like a display. A message. Before I could even process it, I heard rapid footsteps charging from behind me. Heavy, fast, close. I didn't look back. I ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like rubber. I didn't stop until I reached the road and collapsed against my car. I never went back. I still don't know who was out there, or why they were playing with me like that. But I know one thing. That music wasn't meant to entertain. It was meant to lure. Next story. The moment I understood how close I had come to dying wasn't when I saw the knife. It wasn't when I realized the man had been lying to me from the start. It was when I looked back at my campsite and saw my backpack sitting beside a burning fire that I never lit. That's when I knew he wasn't chasing me. He was waiting. This happened in mid-2019, about an hour north of Fairbanks, Alaska, near the edge of the White Mountains. I had driven out there alone for a solo camping trip, something I'd done plenty of times before. I wasn't reckless about it. I packed properly, carried emergency gear, told people where I'd be. It was supposed to be a quiet 2-night escape from work and civilization. I had already been at my spot for 2 full days. The area was remote, but beautiful. Endless trees, rolling hills, clean air, and silence so deep it almost rang in your ears. No other campers, no distant campfires, no voices. Just wind, birds, and the occasional crack of branches shifting in the cold. That afternoon, just past noon, I had started a small campfire early and was eating while warming my hands. That's when I saw him. A man stood near the edge of the trees, maybe 40 feet away. I nearly dropped my food. I hadn't seen a single human in 2 days. I hadn't heard footsteps, no snapping branches, no warning at all. He was just suddenly there, like he had stepped out of the forest itself. He looked like a normal hiker. Backpack, jacket, worn boots. Nothing immediately threatening. His posture was relaxed, his face calm. He smiled slightly and asked if I knew where the cabin was. At first I didn't understand what he meant, but then I remembered. Many of the longer trails in this region had old public shelters scattered throughout the woods. Tiny cabins meant for emergencies or short overnight stays. Most of them weren't maintained anymore. During my time there, I had noticed a narrow side trail branching off deeper into the forest. I assumed it probably led to one of those shelters. I told him exactly that. He thanked me politely and walked off into the trees. The encounter was strange, but not alarming, just surprising to finally see another person out there. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. The sun drifted lower, painting the treetops gold and orange. I relaxed by the fire, enjoying what I thought was my final peaceful night before heading home the next morning. Because of the season up there, the sun never fully disappears. Even late at night, the forest stays dimly lit, like permanent twilight. It was around 9 or 10 when I saw movement again at the edge of the woods. The same man was walking back toward my campsite. Immediately, something felt off. He explained that he couldn't find the shelter. I told him maybe there wasn't one after all. Trails change, old shelters get removed. But he corrected himself. saying he never even found the side path I'd described. Then he asked if I could show him. That's when my instincts started whispering. He'd been gone for hours. If the trail was only 10 minutes away, what had he been doing all that time? I tried explaining the directions again, pointing where the trail started. But he insisted. He said he didn't have a tent and was relying on that shelter for the night. He sounded almost desperate, gently guilt-tripping me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I told myself it was only a short walk. I didn't want to leave someone stranded overnight in cold Alaskan woods. I grabbed my backpack and started leading him toward the trail. The walk felt different. The forest felt quieter than before. The man barely spoke. His footsteps stayed perfectly matched behind mine. Not too close, not too far. 10 minutes later, the side trail appeared exactly where I had said it would be. And even more unsettling, I could see the outline of the shelter through the trees further down the path. It was absolutely visible. There was no possible way he had missed it earlier. I pointed it out, but instead of thanking me, his expression changed. He said this wasn't the right cabin. Confused, I kept walking closer. The shelter was old. Broken windows, warped wood, mold stains, clearly abandoned for years. It looked exactly like every neglected public shelter I'd ever seen. I turned to explain that this had to be it. That's when I noticed he had stopped walking. He stood about 10 feet behind me. In his hand was a knife. His face was empty, flat, emotionless. His eyes didn't blink. In a calm, almost bored voice, he told me to go inside the cabin. My adrenaline hit like a shockwave. I tried to speak, tried to ask what the hell he was doing, but he repeated himself, slower this time. Go inside. I knew instantly that stepping into that cabin would be the last mistake of my life. There was still a small distance between us. I dropped my backpack and ran. I didn't hear him chase me. That was the strangest part. No footsteps crashing through branches, no shouting, no heavy breathing behind me. Just silence. I ran blindly through the trees, heart hammering so hard it felt like it might tear through my chest. Branches scratched my arms and face as I pushed deeper into the forest, not caring where I was going, only that I was getting away. After several minutes, my lungs burned and my legs started shaking. I slowed, crouching behind a thick cluster of trees, forcing myself to stay quiet. I listened. Nothing, no movement, no snapping twigs, no voices. I risked a glance back toward the cabin. He was still standing exactly where I had left him, knife in hand, watching. He didn't move. That chilled me more than if he had chased me. It felt like he was letting me go on purpose. I waited there for what felt like forever, probably 20 or 30 minutes, barely breathing, muscles locked in place. Eventually, the fear of freezing in the cold outweighed the fear of being seen. I carefully made my way back toward the shelter. The man was gone. But so was my backpack. My stomach sank. Everything I owned was in that bag. Phone, wallet, keys, flashlight, food, emergency gear. I had run without thinking. Now I was stranded deep in the wilderness with nothing but the clothes on my back. Panic started creeping in. I turned back toward my campsite, moving slowly and quietly, constantly scanning the shadows between the trees. That's when I saw the glow. A warm orange flicker pulsing through the darkness. My campfire, still burning. I knew I hadn't left it going that long. It should have burned down hours ago. My heart began pounding again as I approached. My tent was still standing. Everything looked untouched. And sitting neatly beside the fire was my backpack, perfectly placed, like an offering. Every instinct screamed that this was wrong. He had taken my bag, which meant he had been back at my campsite, which meant he knew exactly where I would return. I stood frozen, debating whether to run or grab it. The logical part of my brain said this was a trap. The desperate part wanted my phone. I took one cautious step forward, then another. That's when a figure moved behind the fire. He stepped into the flickering light casually. tossing another stick onto the flames like he owned the place. It was him. He sat down slowly on a log, humming softly to himself, relaxed, patient, waiting. My blood turned to ice. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran toward the main trail, pushing my body far past exhaustion. I didn't stop until the trees thinned and the dirt road finally appeared under my feet. Hours passed before a car finally slowed and picked me up. I contacted authorities immediately. Rangers searched the area the next morning. They found nothing. No man. No shelter activity. No campsite remains. Even the stones from my fire had been scattered back into the woods, like someone had intentionally erased every trace that I had ever been there. The rangers later told me the shelter had been officially discontinued years earlier. No maintenance, no monitoring, no reason for anyone to be using it. Which means whoever that man was, he didn't belong there. And he knew exactly what he was doing. I still think about how close I came to walking into that cabin, or grabbing my bag. One wrong choice, and I would have never made it out of those woods. Next story. Sometimes danger doesn't arrive with a scream. It doesn't snap branches. It doesn't burst out of the dark. Sometimes it simply stands between the trees and watches you for far too long. I realized that too late. This happened just a couple of weeks ago, during my first backpacking trip of the summer. I chose a familiar trail in northeastern Wyoming. Nothing extreme. 2 days in, a night at camp, then the same route back out. I'd done trips like this dozens of times. I knew how to pace myself, how to pick campsites, how to avoid unnecessary risks. This was supposed to be a quiet, routine escape into nature. The parking lot at the trailhead was completely empty. No cars, no voices, just clean air, pine trees, and silence. Everything felt perfect. The first few hours went smoothly. I kept a steady pace, listened to birds, and enjoyed the calm. According to my plan, I had about 3 miles left before the first campsite. I intended to pass straight through it and continue another couple miles to the spot where I'd camp for the night. I decided to take a short break. I leaned against a tree near the trail, slipped my backpack off, and pulled out a snack. I only meant to rest for a minute or two. That's when the feeling hit. I looked up and saw him. Between the trees, maybe 60 feet off the trail, a man was standing completely still. He wasn't walking. He wasn't hiding. He was watching me. I couldn't tell how long he'd been there. Seconds? Minutes? The thought made my stomach tighten. The moment our eyes met, he slowly raised his hand and waved. But it wasn't a normal wave. The motion was stiff and unnatural, like someone trying to imitate a human gesture without fully understanding it. It sent a chill through me. I stood up quickly, pulled my pack back on, and continued down the trail, pretending nothing was wrong. I tried to explain it away in my head. Just another hiker cutting through the woods, nothing dangerous. Still, that uneasy feeling stayed with me. The next few miles felt heavier than they should have. Those next few miles took longer than I expected. My legs felt heavier, my thoughts louder. Every snapping twig made me glance over my shoulder. By the time I reached the first campsite, nearly 2 hours had passed. Originally, I planned to pass straight through this spot and continue another 2 miles. But after the strange encounter in the woods, I decided to slow down and take a longer break. I wanted food, water, and a moment to calm my nerves before moving on. I dropped my pack beside one of the fire rings and pulled out my small propane stove. As the water heated, the forest remained eerily quiet. No voices, no distant movement, just the soft hiss of the burner and the occasional bird call. That's when I heard footsteps on the trail. Slow, steady, deliberate. My shoulders tightened as I turned. It was him. The same man from the woods. Up close, I could see him clearly now. Short black hair, a trimmed beard, a gray flannel shirt and worn jeans. He looked like he could have been in his late 30s or early 40s, ordinary at a glance. except for his smile. It didn't reach his eyes. It looked rehearsed, stretched too tightly across his face. He greeted me casually and started making small talk, asking about the hike, the weather, how long I'd been out. I kept my answers short, hoping he'd keep moving. Instead, he sat down beside me. Way too close. His energy felt wrong, overly friendly, invasive, like he was trying to force familiarity instead of letting it happen naturally. I focused on finishing my meal quickly, but he kept talking. At one point, he laughed and joked about my food, calling it a homeless meal, then reached into his pack and pulled out a protein bar. The wrapper was already opened. Not torn cleanly, peeled back, no bites taken. Just opened. He offered it to me with that same fixed smile. I declined. He insisted. I declined again. Something about the situation made my skin crawl. Eventually, he shrugged and said he'd save it for later, since he planned to stay at this campsite for the night anyway. That was all I needed to hear. I packed up immediately and told him my friend was waiting for me at the next campsite. I didn't wait for a response. As I walked away, I glanced back once. He was still sitting there, smiling, not waving, not moving, just watching me disappear down the trail. I didn't sleep, not really. I drifted in and out of shallow half-dreams, every small sound pulling me back to full awareness. Wind brushing against leaves, branches shifting, my own breathing inside the tent sounding way too loud in the silence. The forest never truly goes quiet, but that night it felt like it was holding its breath. At some point, I heard it again. Footsteps. Slow, careful, crushing dry leaves somewhere near the trail. My entire body locked up. I stayed perfectly still, barely even breathing, listening as the sound moved closer, then slightly farther, then closer again, like whoever it was couldn't decide where to go. I knew instantly it was him. Nobody else had been on that trail all day, and no animal walks with that steady, deliberate rhythm. The footsteps stopped. Seconds passed. Then I heard something else. A faint shift of fabric, a soft exhale. Someone was standing still, listening, trying to locate me. My heart was pounding so hard I was convinced it would give me away. I didn't dare unzip the tent. I didn't dare move my hands. I just stayed frozen, praying he wouldn't notice the outline of the tent tucked deeper into the trees. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps started moving again, this time drifting farther down the trail. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Still nothing. I didn't relax. I didn't sleep. I stayed locked in that same position until the first faint light of morning began filtering through the fabric of the tent. As soon as the sky started turning gray, I packed up in complete silence. No breakfast, no packing things neatly. I just shoved everything into my bag, zipped the tent, and started moving. Fast. I didn't go back toward the next campsite. I went straight toward the trailhead. Every shadow between the trees felt like movement. Every snapped twig made my stomach drop. I kept looking over my shoulder. The whole hike back felt unreal, like my body was on autopilot while my mind kept replaying his smile, the way he sat too close, the protein bar he kept trying to hand me, the way he joked about following me. What if I hadn't trusted my instincts? What if I'd stayed at the first campsite? What if I'd accepted that food? By the time I reached my car, my legs were shaking. I threw my pack into the trunk, got inside, locked the doors, and didn't breathe normally again until I was driving away from the trail. I never saw him again. No ranger ever reported anyone matching his description. No other hikers mentioned him. No incidents were linked to that area afterward, which somehow makes it worse. Because it means whatever he was planning, he simply walked back into the woods and disappeared. I've been backpacking for years. I've dealt with storms, wildlife, injuries, exhaustion. But nothing has ever shaken me like realizing someone was quietly testing my boundaries, waiting for me to make the wrong decision. Out there, help is far away, And sometimes, the most dangerous thing on the trail isn't an animal or the terrain. It's the person smiling right in front of you.